Well, hello and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and iTWire TV interview. I'm joined today by Luke Millanta. He's an Australian gaming millionaire genius who creates gaming content, designs games, is an esports entrepreneur, is the CTO of Hive Gaming, and is a Guinness World Record title holder. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Luke, before we get to AlerTor, which is one of the things we want to talk about today, can you please tell us about your first computer and the first computer game that you remember playing?
Yeah, first computer I ever had was one of those old white IBM boxes, the
Hmm.
really ugly ones from back in the 90s. I can't remember the specs of it at all. It barely ran from memory. And the first game I used to play was Age of Empires, the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what got you hooked on the whole gaming thing?
Most certainly. From there, I just kept moving as the internet started to evolve to a point where there were some online games like RuneScape. That's where I started to kind of find my real, true kind of passion towards that, and have never really given it up.
Yeah. For me, it was an Exidy Sorcerer that my father bought in 1979, which was 2 years before the IBM PC. And there was a guy in Western Australia that was programming pretty incredible copies of Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Centipede. It was all came on tape, and it was all black and white. You know, we had a modified black and white TV that had a little RCA port in the back. And then I remember I was running my own bulletin board in the late 80s, and there was a bulletin board service. This is sort of just before the internet, and there was a game called Trade Wars, which was a text-based game that you could
Yes.
play, and it was, you know, it was all sort of all the action happened in your mind, but it was great fun. But I don't have time for all these RPGs and these full-on sort of games. You know, I love the arcade games because you can dip in, dip out, and of course now you've got things like Apple Arcade with 180 games and no ads and no in-app purchases. I was reading about how the newest game on the service, Star Trek Legends, where everyone is trapped in the Nexus, so you can have all the characters, you know, from all the different shows. And I was reading
Yeah.
a review of that about how it's such a joy to play this game with no, you know, in-app purchases, and you got to wait for the energy bar to come back again if you don't pay them money. And so, you know, do you play any mobile games?
Mate, I barely touch my mobile phone, or at least I tried to.
Yeah.
About 6 months ago, I uninstalled all my social media apps, all the games. I use it as a glorified credit card
Yeah.
at the moment. So,
And
yeah,
I know this is sort of different from the questions that we've gone through, but are you a PC gamer, a console gamer, or both?
PC gamer.
Yeah.
So I used to play competitively as a teen, and that was kind of the angle I wanted to go towards. GFC happened just as I was about to sign with a big North American team,
Right.
which bankrupted the North American team. So I ended up being a high school dropout, semi-pro Counter-Strike player at a time when there were no events, and stuck in Australia, which was at the time the least competitive country in the world.
Yeah.
So I've always been on PC. I have owned PlayStations and Xboxes in the past, but after about a week, they just end up being glorified paperweights.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So always PC.
Yeah. Well, that's where you get the most advanced experiences because you can always pop in a new graphics card, whereas the consoles are stuck in time for about 8 years or thereabouts. And of course, the games you get at the end of the cycle are always able to push that hardware to the limit. And you know, in theory, the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 are going to be amazing, but PCs will always have that edge. But that sort of leads me to the next question about, did your parents ever nag you to stop playing games on the computer, given that they were completely unaware that one day gaming would enable you to become a millionaire?
Um, I think the only times they ever nagged me were around exam time
Yeah.
at school when I needed to study.
Yeah.
And I used to have a book that I would have open on some random subject. And as soon as I heard them coming up the stairs, I'd get the book out and turn the monitor off on the computer. As soon as they went back downstairs again, the book was gone and I was back playing. And the other time would be back in the dial-up era when mum wanted to use the phone.
Oh yes,
That would be the only time I really ever got nagged to
yeah. Get
get
off.
off.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I was running the bulletin board, because phone lines were super expensive back then, and it was even expensive to dial into Sydney or STD rates, so I was dialing into Canberra bulletin boards at the time, and every now and then I'd dial into one, but I keep it short because of the time limit. But yeah, I had the bulletin board running from 9 p.m. at night to 7 a.m. in the morning because, night owls and all the rest, and you would dial up to another bulletin board to get feeds of mail and all that sort of thing. And the only time it ever backfired was when something happened to my grandmother and the neighbours were trying to call all night. I could see the logs of this redial, redial, redial. I mean, of course, today you don't have to worry. You've got mobile phones, but back then it was a concern.
Which fun.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So can you tell us about your Guinness World Record and the business of creating gaming content and how you were able to monetize all of this? And, what was the moment that you realized that you could sell your creations and that people would buy them globally?
Yeah. So my game design work is more of a hobby than actually a business. The business that I most recently sold was certainly in that same space, but the design piece is more of a hobby. Essentially, I build custom content for existing games, whether that be pretty looking guns and weaponry, shields, swords, whatever,
Yeah.
And also completely custom levels. I got into that scene in late 2014. A friend pointed me to the Steam Workshop, which is where most of this content is uploaded. And I started having a look and seeing that, every day thousands and thousands of items were being uploaded and voted on.
Virtual
And
goods.
yeah, virtual goods, right? And some of them were really awesome. Some of them were not so awesome. And
You realized you could do better.
well, I realized that there were certain skills that I had that I could use to build out some awesome content here. But really, it was about finding something that differentiated me, made me stand out.
Yeah.
So I actually went and partnered with one of the world's biggest gaming teams straight off the bat, no experience at all. I just kind of talked my way into it.
Bluffed it.
Yeah, and talked to Fnatic out of Sweden, partnered with them, and developed some weapon skins for them. And it went from there. Overnight, I went from 0 to 10,000 followers. That was enough to get me a partnership with a big peripheral company out of the US and Singapore called Razer. Partnered with them in 2016. Again, it just kept rolling from there. And since then, I've partnered with Complexity Gaming, owned by the Dallas Cowboys, to do things. I've partnered with, some Australian-based DJs such as DJ Tiger Lily here in Sydney, and just gone from there. And people like what I'm doing, and I'm more focused on the levels now because you can add advertising into them, monetize that content, which is kind of cool. And eventually got to a point where I got an email from the Guinness World Records saying, "Hey, we're looking to do some more in the gaming space. This is something that we've picked up. We note that you've got 120,000+ followers, which at the time was the highest, still is, but I'm now well past 120,000. And they gave me this award, and I thought that was pretty cool. It was very good. It actually was the day after my 30th birthday, so it was a good birthday present as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And what were you designing the skins in? Was it a graphic design program or Photoshop, or what was that?
Photoshop mostly, for Counter-Strike, and then 3D modeling software for games like Resident Evil 2, Team Fortress 2, these kind of games. Depends on the game.
Yeah, and did the software allow you to take the designs that you had created in Photoshop and then wrap them around those 3D models so they looked good?
Yeah, pretty much. You unpack the 3D model files, you insert your designs over the top of them and repackage them. Yeah.
And I guess anybody can get into this if they have a bit of a graphical flair and they're a fan of gaming, if they want to emulate your success.
Yeah, look, it's not something that's incredibly difficult to get into. It just takes a little bit of practice, some reading, and some artistic flair. But yeah, anybody can take their thoughts out of their head and turn them into the real world. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that could be the next Guinness World Record holder title too, and earn money from virtual goods, which has been something for the past 10 or 15 years that people have been doing. So it was, it was.
Yeah, there was an asteroid that sold a couple of years ago for $650,000 in a game because they can mine it. But in Counter-Strike, which is the game that I preference, you can sell weapon skins and other virtual products such as cool-looking knives. It was actually the second business venture I sold was actually facilitating those trades and was a trading platform. So yeah, lots of cool and interesting things to be done in this space, especially around virtual goods.
Yeah. Now, part of the reason for the interview today, besides finding out this information about the world record, and we've still got more sort of questions to come, but you have created something called AlerTor, which we'll go into more detail in just a moment. But it's about the dark web. So when did you get interested in the dark web and start exploring it?
I started playing around with it probably in 2011, 2012. Mm-hmm. To be perfectly honest with you, in terms of spending time connected to Tor, I've probably done so less than 10 times in my entire life. You'll be relieved to know the content that's hosted on the Tor network is not something I'm particularly interested in. But I think it is important to understand these things, especially given my cybersecurity background as well. Mm-hmm. So I have spent time, back in the day, looking through Silk Road, which was used as a drug trafficking marketplace. Mm-hmm. I have spent time on HackBB, which is where back in the day they used to, until it was shut down with FBI, fortunately, they used to sell, stolen credit card information and this and that. It is important to know kind of who you're dealing with. In that sense. And yeah, I got into it a long time ago. What interests me about Tor is that it is an area that is relatively unexplored by many, many, many people. And as a result, you can take, again, ideas out of your head and go and explore them, see, and it's a good place as a sandbox for me to test my skills, see whether I can build these tools, see whether I can, monitor things, change things.
So what is the short version of your cybersecurity background?
My career after leaving school, I joined the Defence Signals Directorate out of Canberra, so we're the Department of Defence, in various roles down there. After receiving some commendations and also realising that I can make more money in the private sector, I went and did so. Then more recently, in 2018, I was named the Chief Information Officer at First Wave Cloud Technology, ASX listed cybersecurity company. And then later, after spending 18 months, 2 years in that role, moved across and served as the Chief Data Scientist, as there was data capabilities lacking there.
So when did you realize that creating an alerting tool would be a great idea? I mean, what's the story behind AlerTor?
Well, I use Google Alerts to monitor for information about myself, because not because I like reading about myself, more just it's good PR practice. I'm sure that most publicists do the same. Most PR agencies do the same. I hope that my publicist does the same. If he doesn't, I'm going to have a word with him after this. But I started looking at it, and it's just kind of how emails fall in my inbox, right? So I got an email from Google Alerts saying that my name had been mentioned in an article, and then I got a Tor Weekly news update, and thought to myself, hey, Google and other, Google Alerts and other competing tools don't monitor Tor. It's probably the area that if your business or your name is being mentioned on Tor-based messaging boards, you probably want to know about it, because 9 times out of 10 it isn't going to be good for you.
Yeah.
So I decided, look, realistically, well, really, I should say, I just want to see whether I can do this, and that's how I did it.
Yeah. So, have you already found yourself or Hive Gaming or other information that you're tracking through AlerTor popping up in your emails? And if you have, what was it about?
Fortunately, I haven't found anything related to me personally. I'm hoping that doesn't change after this. But I have found, I have used search terms such as names of financial institutions, American Express, Amex, Citibank, Citigroup, these kind of things. They pop up all the time, as you would expect, given that, a lot of these services on Tor are being used to sell stolen credit card information, which I think, and that's why I used those terms. I wanted to see, if this was actually going to be of use. And the first use I thought of was, well, let's monitor and see how many times Amex is mentioned a day. A lot is the answer to that. Yeah.
And in the article that accompanies this video, the video will be embedded in, and I'll also have all this information in the video's description on YouTube. But is AlerTor exclusive to Tor? Because I was going to say that the article talks about other, dark networks out there. There's a few. And so is it exclusive to Tor, or does it work on competing networks such as Freenet?
It is exclusive to Tor at the moment. It probably will remain so. I am going to release the code shortly after this interview so that other people can go and build on it. Mm-hmm. As I said, I built this as a hobby just to see whether I could do it. I don't plan to commercialize it in any which way.
Yeah. And you put it together in a weekend, which is impressive.
Put it together in a weekend, a very boring weekend. It was cold. I was sick, and lockdown things, I suppose. I'll release the code, see what other people can do with it, and hopefully they can expand it out, add more functionality, both for Tor and other competing networks.
Yeah. So, obviously it'll be exposed in the code how you're doing it, but how are you searching these sites, the dark web? And, why isn't Google doing it? I've read that the DuckDuckGo can search some Tor sites and provide some information. And I've looked online, there are, dark web search tools, but they don't provide alerts in the way that you're doing it. How do you search the dark web and to get these alerts in a nutshell?
So it's probably, given that it was coded in less than 72 hours, probably quite a crude web crawler. But essentially what this does is started off with a database of well-known onion services, Tor services, and essentially crawl those on a timely basis and look for updates. That's where the alerting comes in. If in the last instance when the website was crawled, Hive Gaming isn't there, and in the next instance it is, that's when we send an alert. But that web crawler also looks for links to other onion services. So there's websites out there like the Hidden Wiki, which has a huge database of onion services that exist. The service will actually take that and then crawl those and add those URLs to the database, and then just keeps going around in a circle and builds bigger and bigger and bigger.
And do you think Google isn't searching that because it doesn't want to point people to that information? Or, I suppose we can't really speculate too much on why Google is or isn't doing anything, but what are your thoughts?
It's bad PR if you're able to Google stolen credit card information and it pops up with a site where you can buy it. But also, I think that the interest probably isn't there for them in terms of like a commercial business sense as well. It is still a very niche area of the internet.
So I did have a question about how you were saying AlerTor is a hobby and that you'll not be looking to commercialize it, which you've explained, and you're going to share the code, which hopefully will get some of the we already hear about Norton, for example, searching the dark web. So I guess some of these internet security companies are doing it, but hopefully this pushes them to do it more and to bring this much more to the fore. A question that I've got is, what should somebody do if they find their information has popped up on AlerTor if they search the dark web themselves. What can people do once that information has been, is shown to be there?
Well, somewhat lengthy question, lengthy answer.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what's there.
Yeah.
If it's information pertaining to financial records, contact your financial institution and contact the authorities. If it's, we've seen groups, organizing, more like less, cybercrime based things like, riots, these kind of things on there. Again, contact authorities. There are people out there for both, the real world problems and also the cybersecurity, digital issues that can help with anything on there. I would suggest, looking at it is a hard question to answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like, in the US, they have a thing called Norton LifeLock. And LifeLock has been around, and it tells you if somebody has tried to open up a bank account in your name or is trying to otherwise use your information. And basically, I mean, the first step to be able to do anything about it is to know. And what you do after that depends, as you say, quite rightly, on the information that has been exposed. I mean, the information could be fake, it could be real. I mean, if you see financial information there, you might think, oh, have I got a leak in my company? Has my, Xero accounting software been compromised? So knowledge is power if you do something with it. And the first step is to have that information, and AlerTor is one way to do that. And hopefully people will, build upon what you've created and make it into a more fuller featured service. Because at the moment it does look very basic, but then as you say, it was designed in 72 hours and it does a very simple task. And I mean, I went to the AlerTor site, put my name in there, haven't received any alerts yet. Hopefully, like you say, hopefully I won't get any either.
Give it an hour.
So look, unless it's all top secret, what are you working on next?
So at the moment, outside of work, just focusing on a couple of game design projects, focusing on a couple of art projects. Mm-hmm. So do a lot of art in my spare time as well. And that's kind of how that was the other, push into that game design space, able to access so many people worldwide. So I'm kind of sitting there. In terms of software projects, not a lot other than what I'm doing at Hive, really, as my day job.
Yeah, well, I'll come to that in a second. One question that for some reason I didn't alert you about is I always like to ask the people I'm interviewing, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received in life to help you get where you are today? From a mentor or a teacher or a parent? Or...
Yeah, I think that the best one is to, try not to be, without sounding very cliche, two things. One is to own your mistakes when you make a mistake, and seek help. And that's irrelevant of your position in a company. If you're the CTO of a company and you make a mistake, you need to own that, because it shows your team that you're willing to, and lead by example.
They always say the cover up is worse than the crime.
Most certainly, man. Most certainly, causes a lot more damage. And if you're a junior employee, owning your mistakes, it actually, while nobody likes making mistakes, owning your mistakes and learning from them and helping fix the problem, and asking for advice, actually goes a long way to showing that you're actually, a mature and responsible person.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is to, and this is, sometimes difficult to do, but try to not be the smartest person in the room. And what I mean by that is, when you go into a room, try and find somebody that you can learn something from, because, you mightn't use it then, you mightn't use it next month, but, years later, somebody might ask you a question, or you might be tasked to do something. And you go, oh, wow, yeah, I remember when I, learned this from this guy. I understand a little bit about that. And that gets your foot in the door to go and solve the problem. So, yeah, try and be a sponge in meetings and learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So how is Hive Gaming going, and what does your job as CTO entail?
Hive's going really well. So we just finished a seed round of capital funding. Valuation's gone up, which is always good. Mm-hmm. And, we hope to have our second product in market in the next couple of months. A lot of good partnerships there that at the moment I can't really talk too much about, but very big deals. And as CTO, I sit number 2 in the company behind Randall Noble, company CEO, great guy. Doesn't pay me enough, but and essentially I'm responsible for leading the development of all of our product suite, setting company technology strategy, and implementing that strategy. So yeah.
And for those who don't know, what is Hive Gaming's products? Do you make games, or do you sell gaming computers? Just for those who've got no idea.
Yeah, sure. So we're a technology services company. So I've got my work cut out for me. Our 2 products, the one that has been launched in the market is Nectar. It is a experience delivery platform that essentially allows fans to engage with streamers, professional gamers, play with them, and it's another great way for content creators to monetize, and commercialize their audience. And the second product that we'll be launching is in a completely different area where I have some experience. It's in the wagering side of esports. So yeah, I can't go too much on that one at the moment, but yeah, in the esports wagering space.
No doubt we'll hear about it soon. So what is your final message for iTWire viewers and readers, and for your current and future customers and partners?
If you've made it this far through the video, thank you. It's very, very nice to think I'm worth the time. And for future partners and customers, I hope that whatever we do together, it's a success.
Well, Luke Millanta, Guinness World Record title holder and gaming millionaire, thank you so much for your time, and I hope we can talk again in the future.
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.